Hey guys, Clarrisani here again. Just want to do a quick video on the gun laws here in Australia in wake of the Las Vegas shootings. Now, Australia's always held up as the country to use for gun laws, and there's a good reason for that. And that's the fact that we haven't had a mass shooting, a massacre essentially, since 1996. Just want to clarify, there has been one mass shooting which isn't talked about much, and that was in September 9th, 2014, where a man killed his wife and 3 children before turning a gun on himself. But while it is a mass shooting per se, it's not a random massacre. It's not pointing and randomly firing like we had at Port Arthur. Now, and I should also point out, people also talk about the Sydney siege, which was a lone gunman. It's worth noting it was a siege, it was a hostage situation, and the majority of those who were killed or injured were actually hurt and hit by police fire. It was actually the police who did most of the shooting in that incident, not just the gunman. Now she's behind me in the doll's house. Okay. Now, it is actually a myth that Australia banned all guns. We hear that said all the time. Australia banned all the guns. No, we didn't. Guns aren't banned in Australia. They're actually not. Guns are not actually banned in this country. Some are. Now, we put guns into... We put classifications on guns. We put them into categories, and guns in certain categories are banned. For example, our restricted category includes machine guns, rocket launchers, fully automatic self-loading rifles, which are banned in most states of America. Flamethrowers and anti-tank guns. I mean, they're common sense. Why would a civilian have those sort of guns? Then they move into your other categories, and there's what level of control is on each category depends on the state. I mean, your category A is your rimfire, not semi-automatic, your shotguns, not pump action or semi-automatic, your air rifles, including semi-automatic, and paintball guns. That's your category A. There's less restrictions on those. Category B are your centerfire rifles, bolt action, pump action, lever action, but not semi-automatic, and muzzle-loading firearms, and made after 1901, which was when Australia became a federation. Your category C is your pump action and self-loading shotguns, which have a magazine of 5 rounds or fewer, and semi-automatic rimfire rifles up to 10 rounds. So it's very, very small magazines. Must you? She has to sing. Your farm workers your primary producers, farm workers, firearm dealers, firearm safety officers, collectors, and daily targets, they can actually own Category C firearms. Category D is all your self-loading centerfire rifles, your pump-loading or self-loading shotguns that have a magazine capacity of more than 5 rounds, and semi-automatic rifles over 10 rounds. And they're restricted to government agencies, occupational shooters, and primary producers. So only those people can actually own these guns. Your category H is your handguns and air pistols, and the class is covered by your target shooters, so people who do it professionally, and people in security officers, not all, just some. If you want to actually own one of these guns, you must actually do 6 months using club handguns, so you have to be part of a gun club. You have to have 6 months showing that you know how to use these, and then you can actually apply for this gun. Only a certain number of guns can be released a year, and you have to be you have to be a paid-up member of an approved or recognised gun club. Target shooters are limited. They can only have .38 or 9mm caliber or less, and they can only hold 10 rounds. Now, there are some approved pistol competitions which are more than that, but it depends on your state, and my state's actually probably the looser one. And there's also restriction on your barrels. There's it's basically restricted on what you can have. Now, antique firearms, which people say, I'm a collector, can actually be held legally without a license in some states. So anything made 1st of January 1901 and prior to that, you could actually own without a license. All single shot muzzle loading firearms manufactured before then are considered antique. So anything before that is antique, and you don't need a license for some of those in some states. To own a gun at any level, you need to be licensed. You actually have to be licensed. All guns are registered, and all states share that information back and forth. So that's the deal. You can actually own guns in Australia, and you can legally buy guns in Australia. And if you're a farmer, if you work out, I mean, you can actually own these guns. It makes sense to own these guns because you've got your dingoes, you've got your dogs out there that are go after your livestock. I mean, sometimes if something happens to an animal, it's sometimes the most humane way to put them down. But it makes sense for these people to have it. It makes sense for your security officers to have them, but they have to be licensed, and it makes sense for police officers to have them. But it's not all banned. Not all guns are banned in this country. It's also worth pointing out that there is actually no age restriction in Australia as to how old you have to be to have a gun. Western Australia, for example, has no minimum age to own a gun. So you could be a member of a gun club at 8 and serve it all and be a registered firearm holder. So there's actually no age restriction for firearms here in Australia. Mind you, most kids at 8 don't have that, but some do. The trap shooters, just professional shooters. Even the kids out on the farms can actually learn to shoot. But what's the effects of this? Well, first and foremost, we actually have very few police-involved shootings here in this country. Because police, for the most part, criminals here don't have guns. They have knives, you have machetes, you have, knives are the big thing here. We've got security checkpoints, and I've seen some crazy ass things. I worked as a teacher, and I lost count how many stun guns I confiscated, and a few other weapons that I confiscated from students. Heck, even all sorts of things we confiscated. There was a mobile phone that was a stun gun. We bought it from China. It backfired. It stunned the student, I think. That was what I was told. But because of that, we have less police-involved shootings. When they do happen, it is because genuinely the police officer's life was at risk. Often it is an occurrence that it's a forced suicide. The person wants to commit suicide, so they come at the police and put the police officer at risk. Mind you, at the same time, we have the odds of police fatality from firearms is very low. We still, if a drive-by shooting happens, it's national news. If a shooting happens, it's national news. Just recently we had a child who was unfortunately killed after finding a firearm. They haven't got much more details than that because they haven't released them. Understandably, the investigation is still ongoing, but it's so rare that if it happens, it's national news. Whereas in America, mass shootings are happening every day. I mean, I think last year there was more mass shootings in America than there were days of the year. The number of children that are killed accidentally or injured accidentally it's in the thousands. It's in the high thousands. And we don't have them in Australia. If a child finds a knife, they're more likely to survive. I mean, they're going to get hurt and they might stab someone, but they're more likely to survive than if they found a firearm. If you also got your other weapons, I mean, clubs, all sorts of things. Glass. I think one of the biggest weapons used around here is your old glass bottle. And glassing people in the face is probably one of the biggest things. Arson is a big one. We have a lot of Molotov cocktails. Gang disputes typically don't involve guns. There are a few gangs that do use the guns, the biker gangs in particular, do drive-by shootings. But again, national news if it happens. It's just a rare thing here, and it's worth noting that when guns were banned, well not banned, the laws were brought in by our conservative government, no less. It was a unanimous vote. It was our conservative government that brought these laws in, our right-wing government. And trust me, they weren't a great government. They were the highest spending government in Australian history. Even if you're on the right, look that up. They might have had a surplus, but it was from selling the silverware in the China. It wasn't from cutting spending, because who did they spend? But it was one thing they did right. And homicides are still a problem, of course, but they're down. Firearm-related homicides, you're looking in your double digits. Suicides dropped. I mean, gun-related suicides, again, I think that might even be single digits. Accidental shootings, you're down. We haven't had a massacre where people just goes out and randomly starts shooting and killing people since '96. So these regulations work, and if you brought in something similar in America, I think it would work. I mean, it's not a closed system, I understand that, because we're an island. We do have a lot of illegal most of our legal weapons come in via shipping. Interestingly enough, a lot of our legal weapons don't just come from Asia. We actually get a lot coming from America. Thank you, America. Because they're so easy to purchase over there. And they're just some things which are common sense. High capacity magazines, not needed for civilians. Seriously, not needed for civilians. These things that they have to bump stocks, not needed. Assault rifles, what does a civilian need with an assault rifle? Seriously? It's just ridiculous how much the MRA's got away with over there. And it's a war. It is a war over there. It is, I mean, it's not about having weapons to fight your government. If American population got into a war with the government's going to win in a heartbeat. They've got drones. They've got SE missiles. They've got tanks. They've got all this stuff. And you think your AK-47 is going to stand up to that? No way in hell. You're better off lying low in your doomsday bunker. and try and take on the government with your little cache of 30 or 40 odd shotguns. Although in a couple of states missile launches are actually legal, which is kind of frightening. But not missile launches, rocket launches, grenade launches, I think they are technically, that are the legal ones. There are grenade launches, which is still, you don't need them. Even if you're a collector, you'd keep them in a gun safe, seriously, and possibly at a club. But it's all about profit. The war is really between the American people and the NRA, I should say, not the MRA, though they're a problem and a half in themselves. The NRA and the gun manufacturers make money off Americans dying. Every time there's a massacre, they make money. So they want to hype the fear. They want to get everyone armed. And more people armed, the more shootings there are, the more guns they sell. So all weird people are doing with these big buy-ups and saying, my Second Amendment, which was, of course, written when people used muskets. And you actually could take on the government. And also was about being part of an organised militia. And as much as I hate them, the Bundy bunch were an organised militia. They actually were. I mean, the argument's made that they could be a terrorist group because they were threatening the government with guns and things, but they were organised and they did fall into the category of militia. So they actually met the Second Amendment. But the rest of it's just, you can't defend one amendment when your government's shitting on every single other one of them. I mean, just this week alone, there are journalists being arrested in St. Louis for covering a protest. The police actually went out of their way to arrest the journalists first. And that's a clear violation of the First Amendment. Let alone the countless states which are rolling back voting rights and making it harder for people to vote, even though it is protected in the Constitution. So you can't go on about the Second Amendment while every other amendment is being shitted on. So I'm sorry, America, you need gun control. That doesn't mean ban guns. It just means you need regulation. And you need common sense regulation. Because remember, Donald Trump just recently signed a thing saying that people with mental health conditions can buy a firearm. And they're the ones people say are dangerous ones. And they often are. Let alone the fact that Congress also voted last year to say that people on the terrorist watch list, yes, people on the no-fly list, can purchase firearms. The vote was going through to say they should be restricted, but while they can't get on a plane because they're a security risk, Congress said that yes, they can buy guns. So have fun with that. Catch us all later.